Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live session. After quite the week this week, we've got a lot to go through. So as usual, assuming you can hear what I'm saying, if someone can just confirm that in the chat that it all looks okay, that would be great. If you haven't got the volume up on YouTube at the bottom, if you put that up a bit, that might help. So as usual, it's our weekly recap and market outlook. I've forgotten to update the date. It is, of course, the 18th of June today. It's been quite a week. Let's go through the risk warning first of all. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and CFDs are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 76.25% of retail investor accounts lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. So the format for today is, I'll come to that in a minute. Go through the normal markets, our usual major markets we'll go through, and then if there's any stuff you want looking at, put it in the chat. Please only put it in once, don't keep spamming the chat. So we'll look at the normal markets, we'll take probably 15 to 20 minutes doing that, and then go through the questions in the chat. That's it, and we'll finish in an hour's time, so we've got an hour allocated. It's been a heck of a week, or a heck of a, 48 hours is it now? Massive volatility in markets that we haven't seen. It feels like quite a few months, and it was because of what happened on Wednesday night when the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, said that they think they'll start raising rates sooner than expected, but it's still going to be 2023. But it absolutely spooked markets. That we saw a surge in the US dollar, which of course knocked gold, silver, other commodities. We saw massive stock market volatility. So quite the storm, really, over the last day and a half. And personally for me, when this sort of stuff happens, I want to stand aside and just let things calm down. So I've done one trade actually. I did a trade on oil this morning, but nothing else. I'm quite happy to wait for things to calm down and see what happens next week, but a crazy couple of days. Really upset some trends in markets, and it remains to be seen, before we get into the markets today, whether this is, an event that is going to change some of these bigger trends in markets. That's for me why I'm quite happy to let things calm down a bit. But let's take a look. Let's get into it. Let's look at the major stuff for next week first of all. Then we'll spend all the time today on the platform. So next Monday, interest rate decision from China. Could be interesting. Early hours Monday morning. 23rd of June, next Wednesday, European PMI. So what's PMI? Factory gate inflation. So that could be an interesting one. Inflation, clearly, hot topic. Thursday, we've got UK interest rate decision. Again, no changes expected, but given the effect of what was said around the US decision this week, we closely watch to see what the Bank of England thinks here in the UK about interest rates. June 11th, not the G, that's happened already. I should have deleted that off my spreadsheet. I'm a little bit rushed today. As usual, to go and find out more about Capital, this is with Capital.com today on our YouTube channel. Go to Capital.com. The trading platform we use is Capital. Download the app, open an account, open a demo account. Go to davidjonestrading.com. Find out a bit more about trading stuff from me. That takes you to a Facebook page. So I put market stuff up during the week, and also my trading course you can access from there. Any questions after today, drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com. Clearly, you can't give financial advice, so don't drop me an email saying, do you think gold is going to go up $30? But any general trading stuff, drop me an email. Follow me on Twitter, @JonesTheMarkets, and of course, follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. You're watching on our YouTube channel now. We put out 3 videos during the week on different markets. So if you can subscribe, if you haven't subscribed, that'd be great. We also have our stocks channel that we've recently launched, and I think the link for our US stocks channel is in the description for this video. So if you could subscribe on that, I think there's Palantir Technologies is the one that's going up later today on the stocks channel. Right, that's it. Let's go. Let's start with stock markets. So this is the S&P 500. So this was the announcement on when was it? On Wednesday night, and you can see that the massive volatility. I thought what was interesting was the move we had. That was the initial sell-off into 7 o'clock on Wednesday night UK time. Came back to it about 3/4 hour later. Saw a strong rally off it, and it was also an important level yesterday, down at 4,200. So 4,200, 4,205. We've seen a bit of volatility, quite a bit of volatility. And you can see the market, just as the market's opening now in the US, we're seeing it breaking below those lows from earlier the week. So it does look like we're going to have a pretty volatile session in the US today to end the week. But to take it back to the daily, we go. This is why I think it's really interesting, the market reaction, because we've got this massive trend that we've looked at all the way through last year and this year in the S&P. And this is where we are. And where we are right now, we're sort of bang on that trend line. So for me, it's interesting up here to see, is this finally, the statement by the central bank this week, is it finally going to knock some wind out of the sails in the stock market trends we've seen? So an interesting one to watch. I would personally only consider that trend over if it took out the mid-May lows down at 4,000. So I think we could have quite a bit of volatility around here. But for me, if we break 4,000, that could well be a new downtrend starting. So I think it's interesting, but I'm quite happy to sit on my hands for a bit and see what happens up here. Let's see what happens. But the NASDAQ as well. What was interesting about the NASDAQ, that actually yesterday, so again, of course, we had the volatility on the announcement. There it is there. So the NASDAQ was trading at 14,040, lost 200 points fairly quickly. But yesterday, the NASDAQ actually pushed up to fresh all-time highs. So completely shrugged off for yesterday anyway, the crazy volatility in markets. Let's take this chart out. And again, similar sort of thing from the NASDAQ. I've been saying in the recent live streams that we do that it had been a bit of a lagger. It had sort of fallen out of the trend. But again, I didn't consider that too important just yet. And the fact it's pushed up out to fresh highs yesterday does show some strength there. Let's see what happens. And again, from the NASDAQ, I think for me the level is around 13,000 on the NASDAQ. If we start breaking below there, I do think we've got the risk of a much deeper sell-off. So let's see what happens. I'd still be tempted to be a buyer of stock markets on dips, famous last words. But we'll see how that works out over the next few days. I think when we do this live stream this time next week, we'll hopefully have a bit of a better idea of what's going on. Let's look at the dollar index because it's up. Here's the move in the dollar index. We've looked at this a bit in recent live streams, and I've been speculating, the weakness we'd seen in May and into June, but we were holding above the old lows from January of this year, and I wondered, whether we'd see a recovery in the dollar index. I think we did actually do a dollar index trade somewhere on one of these live streams. Oh, there it is, the 28th of May live stream. So we bought it at 19.22 with a stop at 88.90. And so that's the surge. Clearly, if expectations have been raised that rates are going to go up sooner rather than later, the usual thing is that it does well for the currency, and we've definitely seen that in the dollar. So this dollar strength, you can see it over the last few days. This is quite an exceptional move for the US dollar if we look at what it trades normally on a day, and clearly that's putting pressure on a whole load of other markets. So let's get into some of the markets that have been affected. Let's start with gold. I mean, look at that. We had that lovely trend chugging along. It's messed up. It's messed up some of my gold trades. So we did have this lovely trend chugging along. Let's focus on the price action for now. Let's look at the hourly chart on gold. So it was looking something like that. And then started breaking down through that trend on the 14th of June. But you can see this is the move. That's the announcement. Goes from 1860 as low so far as 1770. So we've lost nearly $100 over the last couple of days, not quite the last couple of days on gold. So, and it's got really slammed. I have to say, that trend, clearly looks to be well and truly over. I'd still be tempted, though, to see what happens around here, on the way up, we had a bit of a pause at 1750. So as I say, I wouldn't be a buyer today. I'll be waiting to see what happens next. Let the dust settle a little bit. But I'll be looking to see, does 1750 end up being something of a pivotal level again for gold? You can see it was a bit of a barrier. March again. April breaks through, finally then starts the recovery, had a little dip back to it in late April. Does it end up being something of a barrier? So if I absolutely had to do a trade on gold now, I'd be a buyer with a stop the other side of 1750. But again, I'd rather wait for the dust to settle a bit. We put a silver video up this morning. So I recorded that yesterday, that silver video. So let's talk about that. And we did do a trade on silver, buying at 26, the market's 25.97, so not much doing with that. But again, I think the previous silver video we did, I was a bit worried that it's stalled. I always often say silver is a boring market, and it has over the last 12 months. It has been. In the last 10 months, it has been. We've banged around from 22 to 30, and it's basically trading where it was in August of last year. So we've spent 10 months, a lot of noise, and not much progress. And I was perhaps a bit worried that the previous silver video we did, was it running out of steam again in this 28 to 30 area? And clearly it's got knocked back. The trade I did yesterday, if you watch the silver video later, I did say I was reluctant to do a trade, but I know in these videos I do like to do trades, the pre-recorded videos. So the trade I did yesterday was a buyer at 26 with a stop the other side at 25.50. So that for me is the trading idea in silver, looking to see if we can push back up to 28. But as I said in the video, for my own trading account, I'd rather sit and wait till the dust settles, because we've got massive volatility over the last day and a half. And volatility, of course, does bring opportunity, but it also makes it pretty hard to trade, I think, because you can get such crazy moves. But that for me is the area to watch on silver. These lows from mid-April onwards. And you can see it held for a good couple of weeks before the price started moving higher. So I just do wonder, is 25.50 to 26 something of an important zone for silver? And I think hopefully on Monday things will be a little bit clearer. We'll see what happens. Let's take a look at some of the currencies. Let's take a look at euro dollar, first of all. Really, again, another one, not surprising given the dollar strength. Euro dollar really slammed on this news. We did have this recovery that had been moving higher, fallen out of the recovery, and it's still, it's still losing ground today. So for me, we do have. What's interesting on euro dollar, I'd still be, when things stabilise, I'd still be quite tempted to be a buyer of a dip in euro dollar. But we have this trend going back from March of last year, so 15 months into that, came back near it in late March, down about 117, saw a move to 122, and we're back now at 118.65-ish. So for me, again, let's see what happens when the dust settles. We'd seen lots of support from 116 through to about 117 for euro dollar. We're 160 points above that level. Let's see if it holds. But if what's happened over the last couple of days ends up being a trend changer, we could well see all these trends change. These levels could get broken. So I think we're going into potentially an interesting period over the next couple of days, couple of weeks for some of these markets. Pound against the dollar. Let's have a quick look at that one. Pound against the dollar. GBP, USD. Again, it's we had that. I suppose, let me just adjust that trend. I seem to have drawn it. Oh no, that's the trend I was looking at. Look at this trend off the lows, off the April lows. Did a pretty good job, but again, slammed over the last few days. So for me, just watching to see what happens when we push back to an area where we saw the buyers come back in over the last 3 or 4 months or so. So, big level on the pound is down at 136.50, a couple of 100 points from where we are now. Personally, I would think when the dust settles, we see a bit of stability come back in, and perhaps we see something of a bounce from these levels. But like I say, I wouldn't be a buyer in the eye of the storm at the moment, because these markets are clearly still under some pressure from where we are now. But lots of zones to watch, I think, going into next week for these markets. Let's see what happens. Oil, let's take a look at crude oil. Where is it? Crude oil. Then we'll take a look at Bitcoin. Crude oil is an interesting one. I think the move we've seen in crude oil, let's again take this step back. We've had this great trend in crude oil all the way up to where we are now. And just the other day, 16th of June, crude oil moved out to its best levels since, we're going to go all the way back to October 2018. So we had a 2.5 year plus high for crude just the other day. So for me, I did buy it. I bought it today in my own account. I'm quite happy with that move. And the reason I bought it today, earlier on today, was the market sold off yesterday to 69.50. We'd seen a bounce yesterday evening, came back to it and was wobbling around, but looked to be holding above the previous low. So I bought it at about, 70.20, let's say, with a stop the other side of this low. So clearly some news has come out to cause this lift now. But for me, I think, despite the volatility, the trend in crude is most definitely still up out of the markets we've looked at so far. So for me, I'd still be looking to be a buyer of crude on dips at the moment, from where we are now. If we take this back, we've got obviously the bigger trend in place. And we've got lots of support left over the last week from $69 upwards. So for me, going into next week, I think the one I'd have the most conviction on at the moment, would be crude oil. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Clearly the markets did have had a bit of a bombshell over the last couple of days, the way the markets reacted. So let's see what happens. But an interesting one, I think, to watch there, crude oil. And Bitcoin's still a bit boring. I did a video earlier this week on the channel on breakouts and how to trade breakouts, what to look for. And I say clearly, if you're looking to trade a breakout on Bitcoin, there's no breakout. It's just boring at the moment. We've got the lows left from the big sell-off down at 30,000. We've got the highs left from the bounce back at 42.5. And since then, so for nearly a month now, we've just been trapped in this zone for Bitcoin. So personally for me, if I had to do a trade on Bitcoin, I'd still be tempted to be a buyer. I'd put my stop the other side, at least the other side of the most recent lows at 30,000. And clearly, it's a volatile market. We need to give it room to move around. But it just looks a little bit boring here at the moment. We need a break either way. We need a break below 30 or a break above 42.5 to signal some sort of trend in this market. And I think it's just it's a little bit boring at the moment, the old Bitcoin. Let's see what happens. Let's take a look at Ethereum. Same sort of stuff with Ethereum. I think we've clearly, that trend has been in place, the latest trend on the daily chart for Ethereum since late December. We've had some looks beneath it. For me, we've still got higher major lows, higher major highs, all that sort of stuff. So for me, if I was trading Ethereum, I'd put my stop the other side of the 23rd of May low at 1720. But again, it's just been like Bitcoin, just consolidating really since that big sell-off. So crazy markets, I think, is the summation of the last couple of days. So for me, I'm quite happy to let the dust settle. Markets to watch going into next week. Oil, I think, as it's held above. Stock market indices, let's see where they end today. I still think these trends are up. We've had something of a shock statement, or the market has interpreted it as a shock. But let's not forget, it's only 3 days ago the S&P hit fresh all-time highs. It's only yesterday the Nasdaq hit all-time highs. So for me, those are still strong markets. I just need to let the dust settle down a bit. FX, Euro, you can see this is on an hourly chart now, still weak. Going into the end of the week. Let's see what happens if we start pushing near these levels from earlier in the year, end of last year, and gold and silver. Gold in particular, be interesting to see what happens around 1750. So I think, as I said in the video on breakouts, sitting on your hands and doing nothing is also a trading decision. And for me, that's definitely been the case the last couple of days, apart from the move on the trade on oil. Let's get into the questions and take a look at any questions that have come through. So the first one, got one in early. Can we take a look at RBOB gasoline spot? I must admit, I've never heard of this. I don't actually know what it is, but we do cover it. So whatever that thing is. I'm guessing is it the spot price for gas? We'll take a look at natural gas as well. We've only got data going back to Jan of this year, so perhaps let's flip it to an hourly chart and see if we can have a bit more detail. I'd probably be tempted to be a buyer, to be honest. We did have a good trend up off those January lows, which is as far back as I can go on this. We had a good trend up, looking like that. It did have a little push out to fresh highs for the year, 9th of June. So it's only just over a week ago, isn't it? So for me, I'd be thinking about buying. I wouldn't be a buyer yet, because I'd say for me that correction is arguably still in place. We need to see a bit more strength to shake that off. But I think it's an interesting one to watch if that correction does sort of sort itself out. So for me, I'd be expecting some sort of recovery, but I'd be quite happy to sit on my hands at the moment. Let's have a look at natural gas while we're on it. Natural gas, I've got a trade on natural gas in this account, I think. This is the account we use for the videos. There it is, natural gas. So bought on the 4th of June at 303 with a stop at 282, and it's up to 270. It's a strange market, natural gas, at the best of times, but for me, I think that trend is still up. It very briefly poked up near 338 a couple of days ago. So for me, I'd be wondering, is it going to gear up to have another push back up to those highs next week? I mean, I think it's a market, if you've never traded it before, it can be a very volatile market. But for me, looking at that trend over the last couple of months or so, the trend is still up. If I was a buyer now, I mean, it's had a bit of a spike up clearly with oil over the last hour or so. If I was a buyer now, the closest I'd want my stop probably down at 310. And it is only a week since it was last down there. But natural gas, I think perhaps will have a bit of a push up again for that. Kinder Morgan, let's take a look at those. Energy infrastructure business, Kinder Morgan. Let's take a look on the dailies, see what that looks like. Again, for me, I think that volatility can deliver opportunities, and lots of stuff has been knocked over the last couple of days. But for me, that is an uptrend. So sell-offs for me are opportunities in uptrends. It had pushed to its best levels since March 2020. So we're at a 15-month high on Kinder Morgan. It started weak again today. You can see it's the daily chart we're looking at today. So it started a bit weak again today. But for me, I'll be waiting for some strength to come in and looking to be a buyer. I think we had good support ahead of 1750 in May, just over a month ago. So for me, I'll be looking to be a buyer on dips. So let's see. Blackberry. Let's have a look at Blackberry's a weird one. We did Blackberry on the stocks channel last week, I think. And again, it's like it got caught up in the whole GameStop AMC stuff back in January. You can see it goes from $7 to $28 and then back to $8, and then it's just nuts, Blackberry. I mean, like I always say, when I look at these meme stocks, they're not markets that appeal to me. I think they are lottery tickets. If you're in them and you make money, that's great. But I think it's very hard to apply any sort of sensible risk management. If I had to do a trade now, I'd probably be a seller. Sell short with a stop at 14.50, maybe. Because, for me, that trend has been down for this month. But I think because of the volatility, very difficult market, I think, for me to trade sensibly. Do you consider weekend lows when trading crypto? Good question. I would do. Because crypto, I mean, it's a strange one because it trades Saturdays and Sundays, as we know. We can get some strange moves over the weekend. So for me, I would take a look. I'd definitely consider the weekend lows if I was looking at crypto, because I think it's valid. I'm sure it sees reasonable volume, doesn't it, over the weekend? So what's affecting gold the last few days? It's that dollar strength. So we covered that. It's all about that interest rate statement on Wednesday night has nearly knocked markets. Will gold go up? Who knows? It's the eternal question, isn't it? Bank of America. Yeah, let's have a look at Bank of America. Let's have a look at those. Bank of America. It's pretty weak there, doesn't it? That's a shorter term chart. Let's take a look at the bigger picture. So this is an interesting one, actually. So I think it's always interesting. So if the bigger trends and when the market accelerates away from a bigger trend and blah, 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 we go back to the March lows of last year and we had this recovery that was chugging along, nice little trend. And then it really took off from October last year from $23 to almost doubling to where we are now. So for me, again, I'd be looking to be a buyer. I'd just be waiting for it to stop going down, which sounds pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do that, who buy into a falling market and it carries on falling. So for me, I'd be happy to sit on my hands at the moment. But going into next week, I'd definitely be watching this sort of 37 area, 36, 37. Do we see some stability? I'm just going to grab a glass of water. Hold on a second. Do we see some stability coming in ahead of sort of 36, 37 on Bank of America? So for me, I wouldn't necessarily be a buyer just yet, but I'll be thinking about if it starts to stabilise next week, starts to look a bit more interesting. Copper, yeah, copper's a lot of these commodities have clearly been hit by the strength in the US dollar. Here we go. Here's copper, but this is another one where that trend is still up. And this is why it's so interesting this week, because so much stuff has been knocked back. But that trend in copper from March is still up. So the question as ever, is this a buying opportunity or is this the start of a new downtrend? For me, because the trend is still up, I'd still be leaning to be a buyer. But again, I'd be waiting for it to stop going down, and the zone I'd be watching very clearly. We spent a lot of time from March around about 385 to 4 in March. It'd be interesting to see what happens if it gets down to those sort of levels again. Let's see. But that's why I think next week is interesting. I think today is all a little bit crazy, but next week is interesting. So I'd be waiting to see, do we get a bounce in copper? Royal Mail. I got shares in Royal Mail, like a lot of people, I think, in the UK. They've had a cracking run, haven't they, recently? Let's have a look. Absolutely phenomenal run. So for me, trend still up. Clearly hit a bit today. Where have they gone? They've gone from they've tripled since September last year. So for me, I'd say that trend is still up. If I was trading it, I would have some sort of trailing stop in place because we don't want to give up too much profit, do we? But again, interesting to see what happens. Do we get a bit of stability ahead of sort of 475, £5? That's still 15% lower than where we are now. So if you are in them, the question is, do you want to give up 15% of your profits if they carry on selling off from here? I don't know. But for me, that trend is still up. Be interesting to see what happens if it gets down to a fiver again, Royal Mail. Why have commodities gone down so much recently? That dollar thing clearly affected markets in the last couple of days, have really put a bit of pressure on markets. I think maybe there was a feeling that they'd gone up a bit too far as well. We'd had some really good runs. It's been a great sort of 10 months for me trading commodities. Not so much the last couple of weeks because, as you say, they have come under pressure. And I think perhaps it did end up being a bit of a crowded trade, commodities. We just looked at copper. So it'd be interesting to see if we do have a bit more stability come back in. Euro CZK, is that the Czech Corona? Let's have a look. Yes, it is. Let's have a look. Euro Corona. Pretty weak. What do you reckon? That trend is down. I suppose an aggressive trade. The euro has been losing ground since March last year. If you really wanted to do a really aggressive trade here, you could be a buyer, take the view it's maybe broken out. Be a buyer with a stop the other side of 25.25. Because it is a bit of a breakout. It's quite interesting that it broke to new lows, didn't get the follow through, so it looks like maybe a bit of a false break, and we've completely reversed and broken out the other way. So actually, if I had to do a trade there, I'd be a buyer of Euro Czech, and I'd have my stop loss ideally the other side of here, trying to catch a bigger move, or maybe somewhere in the middle. So it's an interesting one there, interesting price action there, breaking down, no follow through, and then pow, completely going the other way. So an interesting one to watch, Euro Czech. Did you hear about Norwegian Central Bank raising interest rates? Yes, the Norwegians said they're going to raise rates from September. I think, didn't they? So the first bank to blink, effectively. Take-Two Interactive Software. We've looked at these before, haven't we? Let's have a look at them again. Take-Two. Let's have a look on the dailies. I think the trend is up, isn't it? Yeah, the trend is a bit boring. A bit boring recently, but the trend is up, isn't it? So again, I suppose, you could use this weakness as a buying opportunity. So they're trading at 171 at the moment. So we could take the view that it's a buying opportunity. The closest I'd have my stop, the other side of the low, is at 160. But the trend since that's going back to 2016. The trend since 2016 has definitely been up. It's clearly stalled a bit over the last few months or so. But that trend is still up, isn't it? Can we look at Z1 POW? Let's have a look at those. I have no idea if we cover them, but let's take a look. I don't think we do. Can't see them anywhere, unfortunately. Alibaba. We had been short those, hadn't we? And came out of it, but I think it came out a bit too early. Oh, I remember this is why I came out. It's not done much, has it, over the last month? I mean, I would argue that trend is up on Alibaba from 2016. So we're 5 years into that trend. But we've still got these conflicting trends, haven't we? So I think from a purist point of view, the right thing to do would be to sit on our hands and wait to see how this resolves itself, the downtrend from October and the big uptrend over the last 5 years. So that's what I would do, personally, is wait to see. But $200, big support potentially at $200. Let's see what happens. We need a breakout up or a breakout down. For me, I would assume we're going to get a breakout up because we normally look for the longer term trend to trump the shorter term trend. But let's see what happens. It's still a bit, the jury's still out on that one for now. So someone's saying, what do you think about inflation in the coming months in relation to metals? It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's been a lot of worry about inflation earlier this year. And clearly, UK inflation numbers this week, inflation was above the Bank of England's target. And I wonder if, what was I going to say? Has it already been factored in to the prices of commodities? The run up, we saw a strong run in commodities. Don't forget, if we look at something like coffee, for example, we've seen good moves. If we went back to the beginning of, let's go back 6 months, the beginning of the year, coffee was 125. It's been as high as 165. So we've seen it 30% higher, 25-30% higher as its peak. Has it already factored in the inflation story from later in the year? I don't know. I don't think, but we need to remember markets are always looking ahead. So just because we're all expecting inflation to be a problem in the second half of the year, doesn't mean that lots of commodities already factored it in. So I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. Do you ever talk about forex? Yeah, we looked at the pound, we looked at the dollar, we looked at the euro, we looked at all of that. Please check CrowdStrike. It's gone up like a rocket since I mentioned it 4 weeks back. Hold on a second. Let's have a look. I did remember numerous mentions of that one. CrowdStrike. Oh, there it is. Hang on a second. What do they do again? Security solutions. It has indeed gone up. Well done. That's a good one. That great trend. I'm sure I said the trend was up, wasn't it, when we looked at it? So no, that is a good one. But interesting to see what happens up at these. Are they all-time highs? Yeah, up at $250. Cracking one. Well done. Oil. We did look at oil. Inflation. Yeah, lots to talk about inflation today. Carbon emissions. Yes, the carbon emissions one. That was one that was flagged up by James, wasn't it, on the chat a while back? And I just said it just looks like free money, famous last words. I mean, that trend has stalled a bit, but that trend in carbon emissions is still up, isn't it? So we punched up May the 14th to 56.59. Sold off a bit. But for me, if I had to do a trade today, the trend is still up from November on this chart. Support at 47.50. If I was a buyer today at 51.76, I'd put my stop loss somewhere the other side of 47.50. But the trend is up. Bitcoin, we looked at Bitcoin. Your take on coffee and natural gas? Yes. Let's have a look. We did natural gas, didn't we? But let's take a look at coffee properly. Again, that it's a weird one, coffee. I do trade it a bit, and I have the odd winning trade. I closed out a trade in the last week on coffee, and I've got another one running that's underwater at the moment. I mean, the trend from May of 2019 is up. We'd had this sharper trend, it's fallen out of it. A bit like copper for me, coffee. You know, these moves that we're seeing in some of these commodities, is the trend, is it just a buying opportunity? So that's the shorter term trend on coffee since April. So that's, we're 2.5 months into this. It's fallen out of it clearly over the last week or so. For me though, I'd still be tempted to be a buyer. When stuff falls out of trends, I'm always willing to give it one last chance. So again, I wouldn't do anything today. I'd wait till next week because we've got a lot of support coming in from 140 to 145 on coffee. So I'd watch it next week and see if we get a bit of strength, and do we think about being a buyer? Let's see. Valurec, I never heard of those. Let's have a look at those. Let me just do a quick plug of the contacts. So again, to open an account, all the stuff we're looking at today is Capital.com, obviously the trading platform. Contracts for difference and spread betting. Go to Capital.com. To find out more about me and the trading course that I do and all that, davidjonestrading.com. Any questions after this? Obviously, we can't give financial advice, but any general questions, david.jones@capital.com. And at Jones the Markets for Twitter, and follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. Right, what we're looking at, Valurec, wasn't it? That was the one. Valurec, what do they do then? Let's have a look. Global leader in high-quality tubular solutions focused on the energy markets. Okay, God, it's been absolutely slammed, hasn't it? Did it do some sort of share split? I'm a little bit dubious about that. When it falls 62%, did it actually fall? Or did it do some sort of share consolidation? Hold on a second, let me have a look on something else. So I don't think we can really apply much sensible to that at the moment. Let me have a quick look. No, that looks like an actual fall, where it gapped from 28 down to where it is now. I suppose, I mean, it's one for the brave, isn't it? I think that, isn't it? Anything that goes from, God, I mean, $28 down to that, one for the brave, I think. So I think, for me, that sort of stuff absolutely scares the pants out of me. You know, I suppose if you absolutely had to have a punt, then maybe, but it still looks a little bit weak. It looks like it's nudged a bit lower today. Let's come back to it when things have calmed down a bit, that one, I think, but it's not one I can be too sensible with, I think, that one. Under Armour, though, as well. I had shares in Under Armour. I think it's going back a bit now. Going back, I don't know when it was. Maybe it was back here somewhere. I can't remember. But Under Armour, the sportswear company, isn't it? It's interesting. It's interesting again, you know, we've seen a lot of this going on at the moment, stuff moving against their major trends. So for me, this is another sit and wait one, where the trend off the lows last year is still up. We've got lots of support from 16 through to about 17. It's still really weak today. It's had a weak start today. You know, yesterday it closed at $20, and already it's at $19.40. So for me, it'd be a wait and see one. See if we see some strength come back in ahead of this old trend. So it's an interesting one, but one not for the moment for me. Can we look at the Dow Jones 30? Yeah, we never look at the Dow, do we? We look at the S&P, the Nasdaq, but we never really look at the Dow. Let's take a look. So, I mean, similar moves to the S&P, where we're threatening that uptrend, aren't we? First time since, first time ever, actually. We've threatened that uptrend. So for me, this is quite interesting that the Dow, so the Dow is clearly the bigger US stocks. It's only 30 stocks make up the Dow index, so it's not as broad brush as the S&P. But it's interesting what's going on down here. We've got these lows from mid-May in the Dow, down at 33,300, and we're pretty near to them now. So interesting one for today. We're going to see buyers come back in. I think if we do break much below 33.2, starts to look quite bearish on the Dow, doesn't it? I mean, clearly it depends a lot on what happens with the Nasdaq and the S&P as well. But no, it's an interesting one to watch. So for me, again, I wouldn't do anything today because it's all been a bit crazy. But it'll be interesting to see how it performs here, basically, you know, around 33, these lows, after we had that all-time high on the 10th of May. How does it perform around here? So that's a really interesting market to watch today. Let's see where it is on Monday. of next week. Dollar Canada, dollar Canadian, from the Galapagos Islands. My God, we're truly international today, aren't we? So it's interesting, dollar Canada, isn't it? I mean, clearly, dollar strength and all that over the last few days. This is the first time that we've really seen that trend line threatened in dollar Canada. I mean, clearly, I've redrawn that trend line because, back here it had been that, and we did get a bit of a break there in April, and then the market moved lower. I mean, I think that's another one for next week. I'm really procrastinating on a lot of stuff today, aren't I? But I think because we had such a crazy couple of days, let's wait for the dust to settle. But perhaps this is the first signs of a trend change in the dollar against the Canadian dollar. So for me, let's come back to it in a week's time. But I mean, I wouldn't have been a buyer here because the trend was down, so I wouldn't have caught that move. It's pretty overbought, as you can see on the RSI. It's the most overbought it's been since actually the highs from March of last year. But a really interesting one to watch, and the first, we're seeing that trend line threatened on the Canadian dollar. Do you miss those golden era days of trading, especially with this day and age of internet? I remember the days when I was trading in the 1920s, ahead of the Wall Street crash. I started trading in the 1990s. Back then, you had to phone your orders in, so it wasn't anywhere near as frenetic as how it is now as a retail trader. And I think you could make the argument. I would make the argument that having all this short-term data at your fingertips, is it a good thing? I mean, I think it definitely makes people trade a lot more short-term. Whether that's good or bad is a whole other discussion. But it definitely makes life easier. But I think it makes it harder to switch off from markets as well these days. So there are pros and cons. Natural gas. We looked at natural gas. NEO. Please cover NEO. Is NEO the electric car company? Yeah, because that was the other one, the Lordstown, wasn't it? The other electric car company. Let's have a quick look at those and we'll go back to NEO, because the chief exec and the finance director resigned this week, and yesterday they questioned whether they actually had any orders. Well, hasn't it, the share price that much? But maybe it was down a lot already. Anyway, let's jump onto NEO. Let's have a look at those. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think if we could wind the clock back, the time to be a buyer was down at $32. But it's interesting that, let's have a look at Tesla in a minute as well. I think that trend is sort of trying to still be up, as it were. Yeah. So for me, I probably wouldn't want to be a buyer now, so I might miss out on a surge up. I think we did do NEO on the stocks channel actually, but for me, I'd be a buyer of dips if we've got a decent sell-off over the next week, because I'd want to have my stop loss probably below $30 on NEO. And if I was a buyer at 47, that's a really wide stop loss. But I think it looks to have shrugged off some of this sideways stuff. So I'd be tempted to wait and see if we get a bit of a correction. But for me, I'd be more positive than negative on that one. Let's have a look at Tesla. What have they been doing? They're okay, aren't they? They're still holding above that trend. I think we've got a trade on Tesla somewhere. Hang on. Tesla. Oh yeah, Tesla, 18th of May. So I bought them 18th of May at 580. So for me, that trend, it's all right on Tesla, isn't it? That trend's done a good job. So the trend is still up. It may be some time before we see $900 a share again. But let's see. Who's spamming the thing? Buy dollar, go long. Oh. But dollar South Africa, dollar South African rand, dollar rand. It's all breaking out, isn't it? This is the thing. This is why it's interesting what we're seeing this week with all this dollar strength. I'd need to redraw that dollar rand line. It's not quite there yet on dollar rand, but it makes for an interesting week. So we've seen dollar weakness against the South African rand and something of a turnaround since then, but that trend hasn't gone. Let's see. Let's see what happens next week. Royal Mail, we looked at Royal Mail. Euro sterling, I do have a trade on Euro sterling. Looking for a turnaround. It's not happening at the moment. It's pretty boring at the moment, I have to say. So for Euro sterling, I bought Euro sterling, I can't remember when, here somewhere, higher than where it is now anyway. And I just wonder, the slide we've seen in Euro sterling, the market breaks out. It's gone really nowhere. It's drifting a bit, to be honest. I'd still be tempted to be a buyer with a stop loss underneath that April low in euro sterling. But you can see it's been a bit of a dull couple of months overall. We looked at silver, looked at Neo, looked at Blackberry. It's all over for gold and precious metals. I sold mine a week ago. Okay, well, you did well selling a week ago. Well done on that. How do you think about AT&T? Hold on a second. AT&T. I think we did look at that on the stocks channel, AT&T, because the other week or month they sold their entertainment business, didn't they? It looks pretty rubbish, doesn't it? To be honest, if you go back years, it's been a terrible performer over the years, and it looked like it was trying to recover, and it looks like it's just given it up. So for me, I think the risk is, I think it'd be interesting to see if it gets back to the Feb low, but it looks pretty weak. Dow Jones, we looked at Dow Jones. Do you have an opinion on Amigo? Isn't that the company that's in a lot of trouble? The UK, it's not payday loans, isn't it, but higher risk loans. I think it's difficult, because it's a tiny, it's not even a penny now. Is that 8p? Is it 8p a stock? No, I think it's 8p, isn't it? I think for me, again, when it goes from 30p in May to 8p now, I mean, it's lost 70% of its value in a month. I think it's quite a big gamble, really. So for me, no real opinion for me, to be honest. But if you buy them at 8 and they go back to 20, good luck with it. Silver, we looked at silver. What do you think about Exxon? Let's have a look at Exxon. Big oil company. I think we did Exxon as well on the stocks channel. I think for me that the trend still looks up, isn't it? I mean, clearly I probably need to adjust that trend line a bit, but clearly the oil companies have done well on the back of a rising oil price. So for me, again, it's correcting at the moment for the last few days, but that trend is still up. So I wouldn't do anything today, but we've got really good support from 54 to 57.50. I'd be tempted to be a buyer. It does make me a bit nervous actually about oil at the moment. I saw at least 2 or 3 comments this week, analyst comments saying, "Oh, it looks like oil could go to $100," and it's at 70-ish now. And when big numbers like that start getting thrown around, I do start to worry that perhaps the trend could be coming to an end soon. So that does make me perhaps a little bit cautious. We consider how far oil has come in the last 6 or 7 months or so. Clearly things don't go up forever. Oil is still doing well, but I do just get a bit nervous that perhaps markets are getting a bit complacent about just how high oil can go. It's now more than doubled since that November low. So I'd just be a bit cautious about that. But Exxon, clearly the trend is up. Quad witching. So quad witching. What is triple witching? I'm familiar with. Options and futures. Quad witching, it's when contracts expire, isn't it? So futures and options on quarterlies and maybe weeklies as well. I don't know, but it's options expiry and futures expiry, and you can sometimes have some strange movements on the day or the day before expiry in markets like the S&P. So you can have extra volatility, but I'm not an expert on it. So I'd say Google it for that one. Triple witching and quad witching. Cotton. Let's have a look at cotton. Trend's still up on cotton. I mean, again, been knocked the last couple of days, but not knocked as violently as other markets. So for me, the trend is still up, but it is really struggling. We had, not really struggling, but struggling. We had that high in February, and it's just been a little bit chopperama since then. But for me, I think I'm long cotton anyway in my own account. For me, if I was a buyer now, the closest to have my stop the other side of 80, but it has arguably been a little bit boring since March of this year, a little bit of a flip-flop market. But for me, I think we've still just about got an uptrend in cotton. What's your view on Apple? So look on Apple. I'm going to guess still positive, but let's take a look. Have we still got a trade on Apple? We did have a trade ages ago. Oh, we still got a trade, 5th of March. That's an old one, isn't it? So buying at 119, Apple, way back on March the 5th. So in here somewhere. That was a pretty good place to buy. But it's been a bit sideways, hasn't it? Really, over almost since August, I suppose, it's been a bit sideways. But the bias is still up. So for me, I'd still be a buyer on dips. For me on Apple. If I was a buyer now, the closest I'd have my stop the other side of 120. I'd maybe rather wait to see if we get some sort of sell-off from here. But let's see. Dolly Yen, someone said. Let's look at Dolly Yen. I actually got a trade on Dolly Yen for myself. And I mean, clearly, again, with the dollar strength, good move the other day. But Dolly Yen, I mean, I would say that trend is still just about up on Dolly Yen. But 111 has been a problem. And it's interesting that it's been a bit nervous the last couple of days, Dolly Yen. So I think it might be, even though the trend is still up, it might be a bit of a wait and see if I didn't have a trade on. Can it crash through 111 and break out higher? Good support all the way from 108.30 to 109. Let's see what happens. The trend is still up, so for me, I'd still be looking to be a buyer. But it's quite interesting that it's got knocked back over the last couple of days, even though we've seen broader dollar strength. What else? Palladium. Palladium got absolutely clobbered yesterday, didn't it? Let's take a look at Palladium. Down 10% yesterday. Look at that move in Palladium. But I'd actually be a buyer. I think it's interesting that, again, probably not today, but the trend for Palladium has been up since March of last year. Whacked back yesterday, but right back to the trend line. So for me, if I didn't have a trade on, and clearly nothing today is financial advice, I'd be a buyer on Monday. And the closest I'd have my stop would probably be down here somewhere, the other side of the March lows. So it's interesting. It's interesting, assuming it holds today above yesterday's low. I think that's an interesting market to watch next week, because it was only earlier in May we saw all-time highs up near 3,000 on Palladium. So it's an interesting market to watch next week. NASDAQ, we looked at the NASDAQ. Wheat, did we cover wheat? Wheat. Here we go. Wheat is another interesting one. Again, not back the last few days, but the trend is still up. So for me, it's going to be another procrastination trade, knocking it into next week. See, do we get a bit of stability next week? Looking at the RSI, oversold and just come out of it. So wheat's a really interesting one next week. And 175 to 180 has been good support. So let's see what happens. Someone's saying the S&P is dying. Let's have a look at the S&P. You may be exaggerating there, or is it dying? It's a slight exaggeration, isn't it? The S&P has moved a little bit lower than it did when we last looked at it. But it'd be like that Dow at that 33,000, whatever it was, level. Interesting to watch this level on the S&P from earlier in June, ahead of 4160. Let's see what happens. It's been pretty boring, actually. It's pretty choppy so far today. Please do cotton. We looked at cotton, we looked at wheat. Can we have a look at Nomad Foods? Yes. We've got about 5 or so minutes left. Nomad Foods. Oh, we don't cover it, Nomad Foods, I don't think. No, sorry, we don't cover that one. Plug Power, another electric doodah stock, isn't it, I think? Hydrogen fuel for electric, okay, whatever that is. Plug Power. Pretty volatile, isn't it? I mean, I remember we've looked at this one before, haven't we? It's breaking out of that trend, though. I mean, it went from $75 in Jan to, 20 in April. If I had to do anything, I would be a buyer, I think, because I would probably make the argument we had a sharper downtrend here. It's broken out. It's broken out through these highs, so I could be tempted to be a buyer. The problem is, because of the volatility, where would your stop go? For me, I would probably want it the other side of this low, because it's only the low from 5 weeks ago. But I'm a buyer at 29.20 with a stop miles away, the other side of 18 somewhere. So that's my only issue with it. But I think it's interesting. I think looking at the price action, it looks like perhaps it has, turned the corner. So let's see what happens. We looked at Bitcoin, we looked at pound against the dollar. Euro Huff. Now, was it you who asked about Euro Hungarian forint a few weeks ago? Because I've had that on my watch list and I was going to trade it. I didn't trade it. And we've seen a big move, haven't we? I think it's a really interesting market. So I did save it to my list, and I feel like maybe I've missed the move in Euro Hungarian, but it's an interesting one. So we had this run up. It fell out of the trend, and I was watching it to see, do these old lows hold? And they have. So for me, I should have bought it. It actually ended up being a really interesting one. Euro Huff pushed down near the lows from June of last year, and it's just gone like a rocket since the 11th of June over the last week. See, if I'd have done the live stream next week, we would have looked at it, would have put a trade on, would have made loads of money. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. So for me, it's a great move. So for me, the interesting thing in Euro Hungarian forint will be, if it sells off from here, do we see strength come back in? So do we get a second bite of the cherry in Euro Huff? But if it was you who mentioned it, it's been a really interesting one to watch. So for me, I'll be hoping for a pullback. Let's see what happens. We looked at AT&T. Palantir, actually, on our stocks channel, if you go into the link underneath this video description, that's the link to our stocks channel. Palantir video is going up now, I think, but we'll have a quick look at it. And I think it's a bit of a wait and see from what I remember. I only recorded it 3 hours ago, but I think it's a wait and see. I think it's sort of wait to see, can it break $26.30, Palantir? It's a bit difficult to call, is what I thought, but for more detail, have a look on our stocks channel. Euro Chuff, Euro Hungarian forint. So I can see silver popping up a few times. We have looked at silver, so we did look at it earlier in the session, and there's a video on our channel that went up this morning for silver. So take a look at that. But I bought it at $26 yesterday in the video. So this is Euro Swiss franc. Nice trend. Oh, look at that. Almost textbook trend. So if we go back a week, we should have bought it a week ago, Euro Chuff. You could argue, and I would argue actually, the correction is still in place. So I think that's another perhaps sit on your hands one and see what happens next week. Because perhaps we get another trip down below 109 on Euro Swiss franc. But that trend since May of last year has been up. So I'll be looking to be a buyer, but perhaps we can be a little bit patient. When did you become a profitable trader? What a really good question. I think like a lot of people, I lost in the beginning, and I lost far too much money in the beginning. And it took me a good few years to find an approach that was consistently profitable, reasonably consistently profitable. So, but a good question. I think one of the things is with trading, and clearly it's seen a massive influx of new traders over the last few years, thanks to crypto, the last year with people working from home. I think people think it's going to be instant riches. And I think for some people it might be, but for most people it isn't. So I think the thing to do once you start trading is you've got to be patient and don't get frustrated if you lose. Because as we say in the risk warning at the beginning, most people lose. 75% of people lose. So it's a marathon, not a sprint, I think, when it comes to trading, unless you happened to dump all of your net worth in Bitcoin a year ago and got out of it in April, in which case you think trading's easy. But I think that the reality is quite hard. It definitely takes a while, and you always learn as well. Actually, to have a little bit of a rant about it, you're always learning. I don't think I know it all. I've been doing it for 25 years, and you always learn new stuff. I took quite a hit over the last couple of days with this move, dollar strength move. So you're never immune from suddenly getting slapped around the face when it comes to trading, which is why risk management and everything else is so important. But good question. So if you're not profitable right from the off, do not be surprised. That is the reality for most of us. Palantir, we did silver, Dogecoin. Not even going to bother looking at Dogecoin. Oh, go on, I will. Go on, because we're nearly wrapping things up. Doge. I mean, it's just buy it and you hope that maybe Elon Musk tweets something about it, isn't it? But like all the cryptos, all gone a bit boring lately. DAX sliding. Yeah, I did see the DAX was taking a bit of a hit, wasn't it? The DAX is a funny old market, the DAX. The German. It was only a week or so ago, hit its best levels ever, I think. But really much weaker today than other markets, and it's just carried on going down. Quite the 300-point slide since this morning on the DAX. Copper, we looked at copper, looked at gold. Boeing. Okay, so look at Boeing. So look at those. Where is it? Boeing. Here we go. Let's have a look at the daily chart. I mean, again, I think this is one where the trend is up. So it's another wait and see for me. The trend has been up off those lows from last year. Still really weak at the moment. It's been weak for most of June. So I'll be sitting on my hands with Boeing, see what happens if it slides towards 220, that sort of area, see what happens down there. And that is the last one for today. So as usual, Capital.com to find out more about the trading platform, open an account, open a demo account, get access to all these markets. David Jones Trading for my sort of trading thoughts during the week and details on my trading course. Any questions? David Jones at Capital.com. Twitter at Jones the Markets. And follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. Spread bets and CFDs. Oh, the risk warning, don't need to do that again, do we? If you're watching on YouTube now, subscribe if you're not subscribed at all. Is crypto accessible by everyone on Capital? If you're based in the UK, no, because of the changes the FCA made. So you can't trade a leveraged product on crypto because of changes made by the FCA earlier this year. So if you Google this Financial Conduct Authority, crypto, you'll see it. So that's why if you're a UK resident like me, I've had it changed for this account, the not demo account, but the account we use for the live streams. But in my real Capital account, I can't trade crypto. So that's why you might not be able to see crypto if you're a UK resident, because it's not allowed in the UK as a leverage product, CFD or spread bet. All right, that's it. We'll wrap things up there. Thanks very much for coming along. Do it all again next Friday. Crazy couple of days in the markets. Let's see what happens. I think for me, I'm going to sit down and see what happens next week, and hopefully next week we have a bit of a clearer picture about what's going on. Okay, good luck with your trading. See you next week.